Hello everyone! If you are lucky enough to pull either Rorona or Totori from the current banner, you may be wondering, how do I gear these characters? What do I put on them? Worry not, I'm here to give you all of the details on what I think is the best gear for these characters, and hopefully after watching this video you will have a much better idea of what to do. Anyways, let's just get right into it. Obviously, Rorona and Totori are both very cute. Rorona is a supporter and Totori is a defender. I'm going to go over Totori first, and then Rorona. And we'll just go through traits, then I'll go through gear, and then Memorias for both characters. So for Totori, her most important trait, in my opinion, is Enhanced Damage Buff A. This trait's very good. It boosts the potency of damage buffs given to attackers. One of the main parts of Totori's kit is her skill 2. It gives all the characters in your party a magic attack skill damage buff, and that will be scaled by this trait. So in my opinion, you want rank V of this trait on every single piece of Totori's gear. Super, super, super important. It doesn't really matter where you get it from, of course, but the red hot crystal as a material is pretty nice because it also comes to recovery with the recovery boost D trait, which is a useful trait. But really just do whatever. Any of these items work fine. This is just kind of the best one. And then as for other traits that you might go for along with this, obviously since we're going for Enhanced Damage Buff A, we need to do traits that you can get on characters. One of the main ones is Resolve Defense. This trait's really, really good for defense. 10% damage reduction when HP is low, really nice. However, it only comes on Patty. So if you don't have Patty, you're kind of out of luck for this one, unfortunately. And then we have All Recovery Boost. This one comes from Liddy, which boosts recovery given to all allies by 25%. So Totori does have a good amount of area recovery, so this recovery boost for area healing is just nice. And if you have both Liddy and Patty, like Liddy, Patty, into Red Hot Crystal is a really good chain for Totori's traits. If you don't have these characters, you can go with any other generic defensive trait, any other generic recovery trait, or even just try to make gear with skill power on it that's maybe useful for other characters. Like, there's a lot of options, but these are the main 3 traits I would recommend. And of course, Enhanced Damage Buff A is the best one. So yeah, definitely want to go for Damage Buff A. Now let's get into weapons. For the equipment, I'm going to go over what I think is the best item and then a few alternate items that are either good in different situations or like slightly worse or around the same level. In my opinion, the Serene Envoy's Blade, Patty's weapon from the Christmas event, is the best weapon for defenders in general. It's completely generic for defenders. It doesn't require a specific affinity. And it reduces damage from single target attacks by 7%. That's a really solid amount of damage reduction, and your defenders are usually more scared of the single target hits than they are of the area hits. So 7% damage reduction from that is really, really, really nice. Highly recommend this weapon for not just Totori, but any defender, but it's very good on Totori. Next chapter, chapter 9, Totori and Rorona will both be getting new sets of gear as well. One of those things is this broom, this wind broom, and this weapon is specifically for Totori. It's for air defenders, and it gives 11% generic damage reduction, which is really big. It's more damage than the Christmas sword, but it has a condition of HP being above 70%. So it's up to you whether you want the, conditional single target reduction that's always on, or whether you want the unconditional damage reduction that's not always on, right? I think the weapons are pretty even overall. I prefer the Christmas one, but this one's also good, or maybe it's better in certain scenarios where you need Totori to tank hits early, before her HP goes low, right? So both very good weapons, can't go wrong with either of them defensively. There's also the stylish broom. This boosts the potency of buff effects given by 8%. This is going to be your best weapon for maximizing the damage buff that she gives. I don't really recommend this one in general. It's not super efficient compared to the defensive options. You're better off going for defense on her because she is still taking damage. She is still your defender, right? So going defense on her is important. However, if you just want to maximize damage, this is going to be your best option. There aren't really any other weapons for her that can improve the damage that she gives to your team, so this will be the best option for that. I just don't recommend it in general. All right, on to armor. First up, we have the herbal shirt. This is just a very good defender armor in general, but it's extra good on Totori in my opinion. When hit by an attack, restores 3% of max HP. That is super strong. It just adds a nice little bit of extra sustain, and it triggers when hit. So, you know, an enemy hits, you're immediately healing. This is especially good with Totori because it helps stack up her passive faster. Every time she gets healed from this, it's another stack of her passive, which means more damage reduction. So very, very strong for Totori, very good armor. And we have a few other options that are fairly similar. I think the most competitive one with the herbal shirt is the Angel Robe from the current event. It's for specifically air characters, and it reduces the damage that you take by 5%. Just generic damage reduction is a really nice and fairly rare stat, so I think this item's quite good. The main thing about the Angel Robe is that you get the damage reduction at the start of the fight, and you get the damage reduction when you're fully ramped, but in like the middle period where you've taken a couple hits but you're not yet fully ramped with her passive, then the Angel Robe will be worse damage reduction and less sustain than the herbal shirt. So the Angel Robe is better at the start of the fight and if the fight drags on, but kind of in the middle of the fight, the herbal shirt will be a lot stronger, right? So it just sort of depends on what you need defensively, but you can't go wrong with either of them. I do tend to think the herbal shirt's probably slightly stronger on average though, but they're both very good. And then we have two that are basically the same. We have the Christmas armor, the Serene Envoy's coat, and the Breeze dress, which will come again with chapter 9. And both of these do the same thing. At the start of the battle, get a buff that recovers HP at the start of the turn. The Breezy dress is 7% at the start of the turn for 5 turns, and the Christmas one is 5% at the start of the turn for 5 turns. However, this one is for any defender, and this one is only for air defenders, so just for Totori. So this one's slightly better if you're making it specifically for Totori. This one's nice because it's generic. However, I think these are a little bit weaker than the other options because they are slow. Like, it's more HP recovery, kind of. 7% at the start of the turn, especially if you're using like skill 1 and stuff. But it's at the start of Totori's turn and not when she gets attacked. So I think it is a little bit slow. But these are not bad options either. If you really want that extra sustain, they are not bad at all. And last, we have the Scholar Coat. This will be the same as the Stylish Broom. It boosts the potency of buff effects given. Once again, the defensive stuff is more efficient and better in my opinion. However, if you just want to maximize the damage buffs that she gives, then this is going to be your best option. I just don't recommend this one in general once again. So if that's something you specifically want, this is what you would go for. All right, on to accessories. Once again, with chapter 9, we will be getting an accessory as well. One thing that's kind of awkward about accessories, especially with this one, is accessories are where you get speed, and speed tuning is very important. This accessory, while in my opinion it is her strongest accessory, it does have 0 speed. It has a lot of HP, which is really nice, but it does have 0 speed. So 0 speed is really, really awkward in a lot of situations. I do still recommend using this accessory anyways. What it does is it just gives all allies more magic attack skill damage, so another 5% magic attack skill damage when it's equipped on Totori. And this scales with damage buffet as well, so it's not just 5%, it'll be like 12 to 13%. So very, very good buff item that synergizes well with her buffing kit. But the 0 speed can be a bit of a downside, and a lot of times for accessories, you go with what you need, you go with what gives the right speed, and not necessarily what gives the best effect. So in general, I think this will be the best item on her, but if for any reason you need more speed for speed tuning or to change enemy panels around or something, to change your team, turn it around, whatever, then just go for something with more speed. This item is still very good. Once again, this is coming in chapter 9. Supplying this skill damage buff to your team is really powerful. Very strong item. Next, we also have the Shadow Bracelet. This is the other good item for her, but this one is more defensive. Once again, it still has 0 speed. It's really annoying that the 2 best accessories for her have 0 speed, but they're still really good anyways. And this one is for air characters. At the start of a wave, you gain the passive buff when attacked, recover 5% of your HP until you're attacked 5 times. So Totori will gain the buff at the start of battle, and every time she's attacked, a stack of the buff goes down, but she will heal 5% HP. This is basically a better version of the herbal shirt on an accessory, but it only works for the first 5 attacks. Now, generally, for a lot of fights, especially with characters like Totori buffing damage, you will often win the fight before you're attacked this many times, and this is just good sustain, good damage reduction. It's a really, really solid item for Totori defensively. The main downside, of course, is once again 0 speed, but this accessory is really, really strong. And finally, for accessories, we have the Hero's Charm. This description is wrong. It's more like the Christmas armor and the breezy dress, in that it gives a buff that recovers HP at the start of their turn. So this one's nice because it has higher speed than the other 2, and it still does something good for Totori. Giving 3% HP recovery at the start of her turn. It's not really that much. It's a bit slow, but the speed is nice. So it's not a bad option. And then other than these accessories that I went over, there are a number of options that give damage reduction, like the ring that gives damage reduction for air characters, or like the hot-blooded bandana, or just a couple other things that might give like different types of damage reduction, and any of those will be good on Totori as well, if you just want to stack damage reduction to make her tankier in that way. So there's a lot of accessory options, a lot of options for different speed values. Just look for what works with your team, and if you can get away with 0 speed, I recommend the headband that gives the damage buff, but if you need a different speed, just find something that works well with that, and it doesn't really matter too much. Now, I do have a few honorable mention items. These go on characters that aren't Totori, but they're items that synergize with Totori's kit. They're all from Affinity Tower, like this one is from 4/4 of the Bolt Tower, and this item, while equipped to a supporter with Bolt Affinity, like Liddy, after using a skill, it will restore the HP of all allies by 2%, and this will be a separate heal to any other healing she does, so the heal from this item will stack Totori's passive in extra time, which is really nice. Now, for Liddy specifically, I would still probably prefer an item on her that gives more damage, like the other armor from Tower, or the one that gives like 3% skill damage buff or whatever. I don't remember what it's called. But this is still, something to consider if you're using like Liddy and Totori on the same team. This definitely helps Totori be a bit tankier, so it's not a bad thing. We also have the same thing on a weapon for ice supporters, so like Claudia or Totori. This one is of course not very good because you'd rather use the Angel Staff, but it is an option. And then we have the same thing, but a bit better on the Wrath Ring, which is for air supporters, and this is actually the best of the 3 in my opinion. This one actually does it as a buff instead of an immediate heal. It's a buff that will make Totori heal at the start of her turn for 2 turns. So it's extra heals, but it's a little delayed. But you don't really have good options in accessories for supporters. So if you do happen to be using like Memoria or Ellie, this is super good on them in combo with Totori to help stack her passive. So this one's pretty nice. If you're using Memoria, of course. Obviously, you would still rather be using Liddy if you have her for your AoE healer than Memoria, but if Memoria is your only option, really good accessory for her, especially with Totori in the party, so that's very nice. Alright, and now let's get to Memoria. Together in the Snow, her featured Memoria from the banner, is not bad on her at all. However, it's not worth using memory crystals on. It's not quite that good. But it's still fine at rank 1. The main thing you're wanting to look out for on Memoria for Totori is whether or not they have good defensive stats. So this Memoria, because it's made for her, has 23% HP, 33% magic defense, and 23% phys defense. Those are good defensive stats. Any Memoria that you have with similar defensive stats to this one will be fine regardless of what the actual effect is. You care more about these stats than you do the effect. This one just happens to also have a nice effect attached, where whenever she is attacked, she will give all allies a skill damage buff, which of course will be scaled by the damage buff A trait. So that's very nice. However, at rank 1, it's only going to be giving 2% every time she's attacked. It's not super relevant. And once again, it's not worth using memory crystals on, so it's kind of a mediocre Memoria overall, but it is one of her better options. But if you don't have this one, any Memoria with good defensive stats will do, of course, like the Alchemist of Dusk especially is a very nice one. Good defensive stats, and also while equipped to an air affinity, it boosts their HP recovery given, which once again, Totori has healing. This synergizes well with her. Other than those, the best Memoria on her, if you happen to have it, is our masterpiece from the Liddy and Sue Legend Fest. If you do have this, you want it on at least one character on your team, period. This Memoria is crazy. It's so good. It's the best Memoria in the game. It's worth using memory crystals on. It's really, really strong. The nice thing about this Memoria is that it's not locked to just supporters. A lot of Memoria that give buffs to your entire party are locked to supporters, but this one can be used on anyone, so you can throw it on Totori. And because we're already using damage buff A, which will scale this buff as well, it's just a very good option for Memoria on Totori, and it leaves your supporters free for other Memoria like Time to Study. So yeah, this one's very, very, very good. Highly recommend using this one if you have it, and it also has solid defensive stats. And last but not least, we have the New Year's Memoria, Feathers Fly on a festive day. This is the one that restores item gauge whenever that character gets their turn. You should have this fully unlocked if you got it during New Year for the full 10%. And this is a pretty solid option on Totori as well, because for most teams you want this on at least one character, and because Totori doesn't generally have a lot of other good options for Memoria, she doesn't need attack, she doesn't need damage or anything like that, she is a prime candidate for throwing this Memoria on. It also doesn't have terrible defensive setting either, so I can absolutely recommend this one for her as well, and everyone should have this, so very solid Memoria here. But yeah, that's it for Totori. I hope that was helpful for her, and let's just get right into Rorona. So right off with Rorona, Enhanced Damage Buffet once again is going to be her best trait. While she doesn't give any damage buffs directly through her skills, she does from her passive, and Enhanced Damage Buffet will scale that passive as well as any gear effects that she happens to have, such as the buff from the Angel Staff. So very good trait. Other than this, there's not really any traits I would recommend for her. Her healing isn't very good. She doesn't have any attacks that deal damage other than her skill 1. Like, you're not going to build skill power on her. You can go a bit of defense, but you can't get area defense along with Enhanced Damage Buff A yet. Like, there's just not really very many options. When making gear for Rorona, I would generally recommend you just go for Enhanced Damage Buff 5 on her, and then anything else is completely incidental. In fact, I often would just try to make gear for other characters, and then Rorona gets the leftovers, if that makes sense. So you want Enhanced Damage Buff A5 on every single piece of gear, and the second trait doesn't matter too much. Anything else is just kind of a nice bonus and not really particularly important on her. But as far as gear goes, she does have some very, very strong options. First up is the Angel Staff. This is new with the Island event, and this is honestly best in slot for every single supporter right now. You should absolutely be using this item with damage buff A5 on basically everyone, including Liddy, Rorona, like just everyone. It can even go in Memoria, it can go in Nady, of all characters, right? This item's just very, very good. And what it does is, after using a skill, all allies get 5% crit damage on their next turn. And of course this scales with damage buff A, so it goes up to 12 to 13% crit damage depending on how much buff effect you have. Just a really, really strong item. I highly recommend using this specific item over anything else. The only other weapon I would recommend on Rorona is the Steel Staff if you have it already, but the Angel Staff is so much better that you really don't want to use this anyways. So the Angel Staff is really the only option here. Definitely make those. As far as armor goes, once again, we have something that I consider really the only option, and that is the silver jacket. This will come with chapter 9 once again, so you will have to wait for the next update to get this, but it's basically the exact same thing as the angel staff on armor, except it goes up to 7% crit damage. And it's specifically for slash supporters, so only for Rorona right now. But it is very good, and if you have, you know, enhanced damage buff A, this will be another 17% crit damage, like really, really strong. I don't really think you should use any armor but this on Rorona when it comes. Very, very, very good item. You absolutely want to be using this. But for other options for armor, we do have the classic golden mail, which is 2% skill damage that scales with damage buff A, of course. This item's fine, but it's not really very good. But at least we have access to it right now if you want something for the meantime. Until the next update drops. It is okay, it's just not great. It's a pretty minor buff. And then we have last and definitely least the Scholar Coat for armor. I don't recommend this on any supporter. This is mostly for characters that give buffs in other roles that aren't supporter. This really isn't quite strong enough for supporters because supporters have other items, like even the golden mail is better than this, right? So it does exist, but I don't recommend using it for Rorona at all. And as far as accessories go, we're kind of down bad for supporter accessories on global, not gonna lie. On JP, we had the Halloween event, which had the witch mask for 10% buff effect on supporters. This is a really, really good item, and it's basically still best in slot for supporters on JP for accessories. Like, this item is very, very good because accessory is just a bad slot for supporters in general. Unfortunately, we don't have this. Hopefully we get it soon, but we have no idea what's happening with Halloween. So yeah, we're just in a bad spot for supporter accessories. In general, just go for whatever gives the most speed on Rorona. Honestly, you usually want her to be pretty fast. So like, because we don't have this, you can just go for like 8-10 speed accessories, regardless of what their effects are. There is one other option that is decent, and that is the Victory Talisman from the current Arland event, and this is going to be her best accessory if your team is using physical attackers. If you're using magic attackers like Izana, this isn't going to do anything, but if you're using physical attackers, this will be good because it does give a buff to all allies for 3% physical skill damage. Once again, scales with damage buff A, so that'll be like another 7% skill damage. It's a pretty solid accessory. It's not a huge bonus, but it's good, right? So yeah, if you do have physical attackers, this is the one you want to use. Otherwise, there's not really good options. Just go for good speed, most likely. But yeah. And then as far as Memoria goes, once again, our masterpiece is the best Memoria in the game for any defender or supporter. Worth using memory crystals on. Definitely a good Memoria for Rorona if you don't have anyone else to put it on. Very, very, very strong. We already talked about this one. The other good option is It's Time to Study. This is a permanent pool Memoria. It's a ton of speed, and it gives a good skill damage buff. This is absolutely one of the stronger Memoria that came out on release, or the strongest, I should say. It's very good, and it gives a skill damage buff to all allies, which once again scales with the damage buff trait. So this one is locked to just supporters, so you need to put it on a supporter to get its effect, and it's just a very good Memoria. And of course, once again, we have the item charge Memoria for New Year's. This will generally go on a supporter or a defender, and you often want it on your team no matter what. So Rorona is a good candidate for this one if no one else is. And then for a couple other options that are a little more niche, but maybe fine, we have this one, which you get for buying gems once, any amount of gems. You get this at rank 5, and it'll give her just a nice little start of turn HP boost. I almost never use this, but if you have no other options, or she's dying to AoEs or something, like, you can use this. I don't think it's particularly good, but it is available for supporters. And then we have an Adventurous Premonition. This one's an SR Memoria, and this one is kind of, it's not used very often, but what it does is, while it's equipped to supporter, boosts the stun damage of all allies by 6%. You probably have 5 of these or close to 5 even as free to play. So it's just like, if you're right on the edge of like having enough stun damage on your breakers to stun something, this can put you over. I wouldn't have this on in general, but it's just a nice option to keep in mind, right? It does exist. It's for supporters. It can give you a little bit more stun damage for your entire team. It's something to keep in mind. Unfortunately, stun damage does not scale with damage buff last time I checked, and we're using damage buff A anyways, which wouldn't scale it on breakers to begin with, even if it worked. So, but yeah, something to keep in mind. I have used it in the past. It's all right. But yeah, that is it for the gear guide for Rorona and Totori. I hope all of this was helpful. Main thing to keep in mind, just get the damage buff trait. It's the best trait for both of them. They both want it to, you know, support your party the best with their damage buffs. Like, really, really good trait. And the rest of the stuff doesn't really matter too much for either of them. But you do, of course, still want to, you know, give them the best healing and defense possible when possible. I just wouldn't stress it too much over maybe making better gear for your attackers, especially now that we have the critical damage trait in the game. I would honestly, personally, be a little bit lazy with the gear for either of these two and try to make better attacker gear, especially with Chapter 9 coming up. So yeah, that's just kind of how it is. You can be pretty lazy with their gear, just get that damage buff trait and call it good, honestly. So, but yeah, that is it. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hopefully it was helpful, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.